Track 3, Self-Directed Learning. I will talk a lot in this book about self-directed learning. To give you a good idea of what that means, I will first give you a formal definition and then share about where these ideas come from. Then, I'll share with you specific stories of my own self-directed learning experiences. I'll start with some stories from my youth to show what self-directed learning can look like at a young age. Then I'll talk about my experiences with self-directed learning as an adult. While this book is created for teens, I want to focus a lot on what self-directed learning has looked like as an adult, because I want to emphasize to you that self-directed learning is valuable in the so-called real world and not just some training activity for kids. Making the transition to the real world as a self-directed learner is a smooth one, while this transition for the unprepared is quite abrupt. For a great definition of what self-directed learning is, I will quote Blake Bowles, the author of The Art of Self-Directed Learning and the host of the Off Trail Learning podcast. Blake writes, "Self-directed learning is an approach that places freedom, choice, and responsibility in the hands of the person doing the learning. When you do self-directed learning, here's what it looks like. Choosing to learn, study, or practice something because it's interesting, important, or meaningful to you. Proactively seeking out people, resources, companions, and other help you need along the way. Defining the success of your learning as you see fit. And assuming ultimate responsibility for the outcome of your efforts. Self-directed learning is not anti-structure, anti-school, anti-teaching, or anti-testing. Think of it as intentional learning or consensual learning. Self-directed learners can thrive in any learning environment, including a highly structured one or a traditional one, as long as they intentionally choose it and consent to its policies." Reference 38. If you've attended school your whole life, this may feel unfamiliar. There's a good chance you have more experience with what Blake describes as unexamined learning, which he defines as the opposite of self-directed learning is what we might call unexamined learning. Here's what it looks like. Learning something simply because you're doing what you're told, without any consideration of how it serves or harms you. Making little effort to learn something, believing that knowledge or resources will magically appear. Blindly accepting the definition of success that's handed to you. For example, high test scores, fame, getting rich. Assuming that someone, something else is fundamentally responsible for what you learn or achieve. For example, a teacher, institution, or society. Reference 39. Most students in school are doing what Blake calls unexamined learning, which probably includes yourself. If it does, don't worry. This isn't intended to make you feel bad or ashamed. The odds are you've probably never been exposed to the idea of self-directed learning. You might be asking yourself, if self-directed learning is so valuable, why haven't you been exposed to it? And why aren't more children educated using this approach? As it turns out, self-directed learning is exactly how young people have learned throughout history. Only recently has unexamined learning become the norm.